I forgot to ask, will you be doing like a Q&A? It's gonna be mostly Q&A.
This is
It'll be mostly Q&A.
yeah.
Okay, so sometimes we get questions in the Twitch chat, so we do walk up to the mic now.
Oh,
Yeah, you can do
perfect.
that. No, we
Well,
can.
that's
Someone
fine as long
else
as someone else
manages
is
them
reading
for
it,
us.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's
Yeah, no, we're
I
gonna.
did ask. but-
yeah. We
Okay.
didn't
Yeah.
understand.
I just didn't understand.
Yeah, if another person is managing them for us, then we don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, if you would want to do this part,
Oh
you're
no,
welcome to.
you're fine.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna make you do it.
Okay. Because I plan to just read it like a script, but like you
Yeah.
seem pretty confident in knowing what to do. So
It's fine.
So have you been in Modern Path the whole time?
No, I did a stint in community mental health.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then, did my tour of duty.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then,
yeah.
And then
My
now
hubby there worked for the CAPS for a few years. He's a psychiatrist.
I
as
was,
well, so.
I'm a family tie survivor.
I mean, it's like everybody up there, not here, but I did my community mental health. I did my training. And it's just like almost everybody has to pass through there
Yeah.
at some point. But no, I love this like the
Hello, hello.
practice and yeah, it's like just a cool place and some cool groups. Like they have. Do you want any groups there?
I will at some point,
Okay.
but I'm full already, so like I got full very quickly. I'm kind of
I was
becoming
very
the
excited to find
autism
Postal
ADHD
Skeleton, and I had to
person.
find an
that
excuse to bring them to the call.
I'm getting referrals from people I don't even
Nice to
know.
meet you.
I'm-
Jeffrey.
I mean, that's what I'm like.
Yeah,
Or you can call me Jared.
Even
whatever
even
works.
yeah, I mean, it's like
yeah.
it's so
How's your
new
day going?
right now. So
Good.
okay, so you're full already.
Keep having to
I'm
remind
almost
myself to introduce myself with my pen name and not
Like-
my real name.
I just had
So,
to
fair.
Dodged myself like 3 times today.
Step down from weekly to bi-weekly.
It happens like
I
that.
got a little bit of-
How are you doing?
I'm a bit overheated and overwhelmed, but I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm making it, and I'm excited for this. So.
How much have you had to be outside in your leather jacket?
Mhm.
Too much.
Very
Do
much.
you need to sign up for disability services? Do you, or that's,
Do you want some of the fan?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
Do you need some of the fan?
I'm good, but thank you.
Okay.
okay.
I've already had like 75 ounces of water today, and so as soon as that like really
Kicks
kicks in,
Okay.
I'll be great. But just like at the moment, I'm just like, man, I'm barely personing.
Oh boy. Oh gosh. That's one of my stems. I'll just do Mickey.
Amazing. Bow bow.
We'll be getting started shortly. We're just waiting for people to get in the chat in the room. Just a few more minutes. Woo! Yeah, yes. Yeah, we are on the interwebs. It's not a truck. We can't just dump stuff on it.
All right, where are we with time? Is it time? Okay, we got like 2 more minutes. Cool.
Angel said she was hungry today. I don't know where she is.
Dragon Age 2? Yeah. I can't remember the character name. It's been a while. That's right.
Yeah.
So this is pure Q&A, right? Like just pure Q&A. Okay, cool.
Just gonna kind of hang out, take as long as we need to with each question. And
Then have fun. You're in a private practice, right?
group practice.
Group practice, yeah. What if you only been in that environment? If you've worked in any other setting?
And,
What?
at
I can tell
Camelot,
more right here,
so
you
doing
didn't know
in-home,
that.
and then I worked in the psych hospital, and then
Yeah.
adolescent boys residential,
So I think he's right. All the
And then
So we
recovery
all,
court.
we all have our tour of duty somewhere.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
and then recovery court, and then now I'm in group practice. I love being in group practice, but I feel like if it wasn't for the experience that I got at the other places that were like
You wouldn't be as
so
ready.
taxing, I
Yeah.
would not be nearly as ready.
Yeah, yeah, same.
So I'm grateful for it, as harrowing as it was.
Yeah, me too. I think every therapist should spend at least 6 months doing something not private practice. Oh, I should turn off my ringer. Oh. Okay, these are very hot mics.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like if I just lean in, it's very loud. Okay, so I don't need to do that.
things.
Yeah.
Also hard.
How's it going?
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome to Creators Ask a Therapist. So, the point of this panel is to just kind of have an open Q&A and discussion about mental health for creators, creatives, cosplayers, whoever you are, to just kind of get into that stuff. So, before I have your panel here introduce themselves, I have some information that I would like to share with you all. And yeah, I'm just going to read this straight off the paper. So, attention, all superheroes. Are you ready to unleash your powers and make a lasting impact? Team up with Zakat Foundation of America, our track sponsor and the heroic force delivering humanitarian assistance globally. For over 22 years, they've been empowering lives through disaster relief, food distribution, water projects, education, medical assistance, and orphan care. Rest assured, their top-notch recognition from Charity Navigator and BBB Wise Giving Alliance means your contributions are in the most trustworthy hands. Join the League of Real-Life Superheroes at zakat.org/DragonCon, and let's save the world together. Or use the QR code on the table banner in front of us, which is probably there, but I can't see it.
We also have a charity with Dragon Con as well.
Yes, so the charity for DragonCon 2024 is the Arthritis Foundation, Georgia chapter. The #1 cause of disability in the U.S. is arthritis. It affects nearly 60 million adults and hundreds of thousands of children. DragonCon will match up to $125,000 in donations. Last year, the con raised $272,000 for charity, and it's time to kick that up a notch. You can donate with your old-fashioned cash and coins in our donation bucket, or you can follow the QR code link from our table banner.
That
Oh.
we assume is there.
And I have been informed is there. There is also a virtual 5K where you get a cool medal and can help raise money for the Arthritis Foundation. Don't forget to tell them the digital media track is your favorite, so we can be the inspiration for the medal next year. All right, cool. Also, I had the honor of getting to meet the CEO and president of the Arthritis Foundation yesterday. Such a lovely and genuine individual. And this is like a seriously good cause. Like, off the paper, like, please donate. Like, this is really good stuff that they're doing. All right, cool. I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then whoever wants to go next can hop in. So I'm Nick Lyle. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a certified dialectical behavior therapist, and I have a master's of education. So I specialize in working with fellow trans people. Myself am ADHD and autistic, and so I specialize in working with those neurodivergent populations as well. And basically today is going to be very just kind of open and free form. So we want to spend as much time with your questions as we need to. And yeah, all right, that's me.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm Leanne Dooley. I'm a board certified psychiatrist, and I spent the majority of my clinical career in the VA hospital system, so caring for veterans. About a year and a half ago, I completed a master's degree in public health, and now my current role is 100% administrative. And so I call my platforms Mental Health and More. So I talk about mental health topics and then adjacent topics like wellness and parenting. And really what brought me to the creator space is that I saw a need for someone having evidence-based information about a lot of things that are going on. My particular passions are decreasing the stigma around mental health conditions, particularly medications for mental health, and then also fat bias and weight stigma. Those are kind of my areas.
Hi, I'm Ria. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I also work predominantly with the trans, autistic, and ADHD population. I do it mostly through systemic therapy, where I teach the skills that society doesn't give us because we are not served by society, and then narrative therapy, RODBT, other things. I'm eclectic. Additionally, I am, since this is the media track, I am a content person. I am a kind of, it is new for this channel, but I've started working with my friend Azil, who's on YouTube. We do storytelling content. I have told my story. I've started doing interviews on the channel as well. So like and subscribe.
Hey, my name is Jeffrey Nix. I am not certified to do anything. I'm barely certified to feed myself. I have a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, which usually focuses on how do you help the people that comprise a business and how do you help a business via the people that comprise them. So a lot of measuring things that people don't think are measurable, like creativity, innovation, burnout, lots of stats. And I am here so that I can speak more about the parts of the life that can be difficult to have research on when you're just talking to a therapist, like how do you prevent burnout? Are there communication strategies within work? Because work comprises an average of 80,000 hours of every person's life who has a full-time job. Beyond that, I'm also an author. I have a free story on my web serial, a free story on the newsletter that I just made like 2 days ago. So saying newsletter is still tripping me up. In addition, I have 2 stories that are going to be launching in the next little bit, always including diverse characters, particularly neurodiverse characters, and one, and what I have cleverly called secret web serial number 1, even has a nonverbal character who has been the source of much research and intrigue for me.
Wonderful.
I'll also say some people are therapists on the panel, psychologists, professionals. We might be professionals, but we're not your professionals. So keeping that in mind, that what we are sharing here is general knowledge and is not to be taken as mental health advice. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. We're here to just kind of have a conversation with you all, be an advocate in the way that we can and help, kind of champion you in supporting yourself and being your own advocate. So yeah, it's very much Q&A. We have a mic here in the middle. So if anyone has a question, feel free to come up to the mic and we'll just kind of get the conversation going from there.
Who will be first? Who will be
Yeah, we're also taking questions virtually as well. Looks like we have a virtual question.
Don't be scared.
You're real for that.
This is actually just a me question. Creative burnout. Talk on how to avoid it, how to I find that like I run hot and cold with my interests, and I'd like to make it a bit more consistent and warm. So I have a tendency to go real hard on an interest for a month or two and then die off. So any suggestions or tips that can help with that?
Yeah,
I have some. So first off, that is completely normal within any of the trajectory. The first part is fun because you have a low threshold for entry and it's easy to see consistent growth when you know nothing. And then you tend to get to the doldrums in the middle part where you are informed enough that it is hard to do the things that you are now aware of. But as far as the consistency of the practice and other things, one of the things you'll see in interesting research by BJ Fogg, it's actually an Atomic Habits, which is not written by someone who's a scientist, but who is a great scientific communicator, is you want the lowest threshold of entry possible. It can be hard because you will want to do something and say like, I'm not a success unless I have carved a whole statue, unless I've made a wonderful painting. But oftentimes what you want to create an enduring habit is the easiest way you can make victory so that you have no excuse to start, because starting is always the hardest part, particularly for people who can be on the ADHD spectrum. And beyond that, one of the things that I talk about is you want the easiest way to be successful. You want to plan for it. You just want to give yourself an insultingly easy plan. The crappy plan that you do will always pay off more than the perfect plan you never start or you can never follow through on. And then the final thing that I think about a lot and that I am struggling with in my own work is when you get into the motivation, people will talk about external motivation, intrinsic motivation. Those are really hard to change. But one that you can focus on is if you have healthy, positive stress versus damaging stress. And that's usually called distress, which is damaging, and eustress, which is good. So distress is motivating yourself by trying to avoid a bad thing. That will work in the short term a little bit with meh results, but it will always lead to burnout. It doesn't tend to have good products, and you can actually see studies that link distress to increased likelihood of heart attack if you use it on a sustained basis. What you should try to do as much as you can without feeling like you're lying to yourself is use stress, which is working hard to pursue an outcome you are excited about, that will make you overshoot your target. It is more enduring. It will make you happier. And in the end, it tends to be motivated by a lot of small incremental goals. Like, I just am excited to see if I can make my weekly goal. I keep gamification of my own projects so that I'm just trying to see if I can hit a new all-time word average for a day, a week, or a month. And then by seeing that continuous growth over a long time and being motivated by something I'm excited to do, I have a lot of very dumb jokes that I'm very excited for that are very rude. And I have one friend who I can always send a picture of. And so I need to get to the chapter where I can send a very particular pun to them. And that is going to keep me going for the next 3 weeks versus trying desperately to outrun my own imposter syndrome and fear that I'm going to be stuck in a day job forever.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
To kind of piggyback off of that, to like get your momentum going and to avoid like getting burned out by like how big the goals feel and stuff like that, I highly recommend having like a couple of separate master to-do lists that are like, these are the big goals, like, finish the novel, record the whole podcast, stuff like that. That's on like the master to-do list. And then have a smaller to-do list of more easily check offable goals that can give you momentum, right? And so it could be like edit something for 5 minutes, or draw a singular eye, and like things that you can really do to be like, okay, well, I did that today, right? I was able to check that off. And it's not just like, well, I can't check off edit the whole stream
Right.
because I only edited for 5 minutes, but you can check off edited for 5 minutes because you were productive. So much of the time we burn out because we don't count our productivity as productivity.
Yeah. To add on that, there's a couple different things. I call that defining done for today. Additionally, some people think that motivation has to be the first thing. Motivation builds as we do something. So just from How to ADHD in her book and YouTube channel talks about, you can start doing something. Like if I'm thinking I need to go to the gym, put on your gym clothes as like a first, as opposed to trying to think of I need to do all the things to get to the gym. Just additionally, nope, ADHD, it's gone. If you have something.
I have the same problem, so I'm listening and taking notes myself.
I think we all do.
Oh, and then the last one that occurred to me, you can always look at SMART goals. There's some debate about how effective they are. But one that I find incredibly useful is in terms of small, achievable, realistic goals. You always want to make your goals something that you have control over. So I, for instance, will never have a goal of having someone edit my work because I cannot control if they're going to edit it. My goals are not to finish a book on time because I don't know if it's going to spiral out of control or if I'm going to have a family member who's going to become a priority. So I love lists and I love Excel sheets. So I have a tracking sheet for my yearly goals, quarterly goals, and weekly. And my quarter goals took me about 7 years to get to, but it is always, my goals for the year are not to finish projects or publish them, but are to hit 3/4 of my weekly goals. And my weekly goals are to sit down and try, because I can't quantify how many chapters I'm going to get out. I can just quantify how many times I've made an effort. That is in
That's
my
good.
control.
Thank you.
I remembered what I was going to say. We often have a wall of awful around things, which are emotions that we have about the thing that we're trying to do. So even if you can't do any of the things that we have said, you can try to change your emotional state in order to help you do a thing. Jess calls that putting a door in it, over the wall.
Great. I love it.
This is recorded, right?
Yeah, you can come up to the mic to.
No,
Oh.
I just forgot everything.
Oh yeah, no, it's recorded. You can go back and watch it as many times as you need to.
And I'm with you. I just forgot everything I said too. It's the only way I can live with myself.
But be sure to use the mic if you're actually asking a question, so that the people on stream can hear
and it goes on recording too.
Great.
Okay, so my question is, I sometimes am afraid that I'm gonna just get lost in a fantasy world, like playing video games or reading, and just like check out of my life, like not be engaged. And so I kind of have some idea what Nick does with this, but I'm wondering for all of you guys, how do you use fictional material to support your own mental health and like support your total well-being, like not as a way to just like completely disengage?
So I am actually a fan of like taking breaks from reality. I think that is actually very important to do. So I guess how I would say it is, there could be a couple of issues when you're doing it, right? So are you like running or away from something, something that you need to be dealing with? Like, is it avoidance? It's still a means of coping, at times. Like sometimes we really do need to like avoid the thing that is bothering us. How I know it's like in social media spaces, how I see it the most is like, let's say there are people who are creating fantasy content, just fun, happy things, and putting happiness into the world. And people are like, but this is going on. And why aren't you addressing, how can you be happy when just the litany of lists of things, right? But we only have so much capacity to manage all of the stressful, horrible things that are going on in the world. So from my perspective, if you're checking out of reality as a means of coping for whatever reason the thing is, as long as it doesn't impair your ability to like really function and do the things that you actually need to do, even sometimes if it affects the things you need to do, if you can put them off for a little while. I mean, that's kind of my perspective. I view being in fantasy, kind of disconnection as a way of coping. It can be, of course, maladaptive. It can be negative, but I also think that it can be a very helpful coping tool. And honestly, I think that people need a break. I think very few of us have the ability to address, because I get it a lot actually. Dr. Dooley, why aren't you addressing just fill in the blank of whatever the issue is? And it's like, I have to be honest, I can't. I don't have the capacity to hold space for all of the horrible things that are going on in the world. I also want to experience happiness and put that out into the world. So I guess that's kind of my thought. As long as it's not, negatively impacting your relationships or other things of that nature, I think it can be like something useful to do.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I had struggled with was the need to feel productive at all times. And I got very into sleep research, which made the negative spiral of being stressed about going to sleep because I needed to sleep better than anyone had ever slept before, which meant I couldn't go to sleep. And one of the things that I came to realize is I had an extremely rigid system of everything that I would need to do. And over time, I failed it all the time. And I had a little notebook, and I would write down, why did I not hit the habits I wanted to have today, including sleep? And one of the things I found out about myself personally is that I need an hour and a half at the end of the day. And if I do not give myself an hour and a half, I will take it and it will be where I don't want it to be. And so one of the things with checking out is I will recognize some of the signs in myself that I need that time. And it is going to happen to me whether I want it or not. So I can sometimes control it and say, like, I really need to read. I have a comfort book. It's going to happen to me. I'm going to open a web serial and tell myself I'm only going to read one chapter, and I will lose a day during work hours and feel bad about it and stress. Sometimes I can hold that off by saying, I recognize the state in myself, so I am going to avoid starting it until I'm in a place where I can safely sacrifice like 6-8 hours of being in a video game or being in a book. Sometimes you can substitute it. So I will know that I want to get through a very long book and it'll wrap me up. And so I will have it on an audiobook so that I can do other things at the same time, and I can disassociate while puttering around my house. So I wasted my time in a book, but I also wasted it while cleaning. And then, yeah, I think maybe you can find, if in the end it is, you can't find another way to get it. For instance, wood carving can sometimes replace books for me. They're better together. But I would say the final thing to remember that helped me destigmatize it is, when you look at some of the research on happiness, people get confused because there are two forms they usually measure. Are you satisfied with the course of your life over a period of time? And then have you experienced happiness in the moment? And people tend to focus very, very hard on, have I done awesome things I am happy about in the last year? Rather than accepting, like, sometimes you need 5 hours that are useless to everyone else in the world, but you felt a very ephemeral happiness for those 5 hours, and that has a purpose. That's a thing that should exist. Get yourself the in the moment happiness, even if it's not something you can quantify as being useful. That will make you better at all the things you can quantify, and hopefully make a self-perpetuating loop.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to add to that, if you don't give your body what it needs, it will take it. it will make it happen, right? Whether that is you're needing a break from stimulation and you have to melt down and close yourself off for hours or days or however long it is, when you're not giving your body and your mind what it needs, it will take it by force. And people can feel really frustrated by that because they're like, why am I getting hijacked by just feeling all of this grief while I'm at work? Or why am I feeling like I'm going to have a meltdown and I'm crying my eyes out when I'm supposed to be driving, you know? And that can feel really discouraging. And so it's important to just check in with yourself and figure out the things that you need, the little nuances to your system, and give it those before it takes them.
So there's something called somatic regulation. It's a thing where what people have described here about reading yourself, learning how to read your body so you can find out what is happening with like your needs. Often when people do the revenge bedtime or other things that are keeping that they feel like are unproductive, one, maybe that's not necessarily true as others have said, but two, we have needs. Read ourselves. We are not automatons. Capitalism is trying to make us automatons. Be mindful of that.
Yeah. Oh, and also to circle back to your question directly about like media consumption and like how you engage with things, I encourage you all to like look into you know, how you interact with media at baseline. Like normally, most of the time, how much do you consume? And when that changes, kind of figure out what that might mean for you. So I know I can play video games and enjoy them recreationally after work and stuff like that. But I know for me specifically, if the only thing I can stomach watching is Spider-Man and the only music I can listen to is Black Veil Brides, then I'm not meeting my own internal needs because I'm not okay. Like those are like warning signs for me that I'm becoming dysregulated, is because I know those two things regulate me and my body's like, please, please. And so for me, I like noticing how I'm consuming that media is a really good cue in for what I need.
Oh, and I meant to tie it to media. When you're like feeling like you're getting lost, doing that check-in of being like, that is your, like when you would notice, God, I've been doing this. That's when you like read and like try to like make sure to find out what's happening. Are you doing like that because you're so burned? Like that kind of thing.
I actually have a list that has General Akbar from Star Wars, and it says that's a trap. And it's a list of all the things that I say to myself that are lies and are leading me into a trap.
I love that.
So one of the things I noticed, and I've had anecdotal evidence that this is true, but if I start out with something that is super high stimulation and super high dopamine at the start of a day, it is really hard for me to go down from it afterwards. So if I have a video game that is bright and vivid or a book that is amazing, it's really hard for me to give a single damn about anything that has to do with work or like boring science articles. So sometimes I'll titrate it and I'll be like, what is something that I can enjoy, but is sort of not as bright and vivid as this thing that I want to be enjoying. And so I will sometimes like stagger, like this is the time of the day around 3 p.m. I'll let myself read at work because I've usually done it and I've done the boring things first.
That's actually like not just anecdotal, that's dopamine regulation. And typically with people with ADHD, like because of the need for dopamine, we struggle when we do our high intensity activities. So doing medium tier, that's literally like there's papers, I don't know where they are, but they exist.
I'm going to take your word on it so I can sound smarter and say it's research supported. And finally, the framing tool I use when I need to feel like a big, strong man who's in control, when obviously I'm not, is I'm like, I'm going to happen to my emotions. They're not going to happen to me. I'm planning my time to be really sad for 15 minutes. It's not happening to me. I'm happening to it.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yes. Do I speak in the microphone?
Yes.
Hi. So I struggle with ADHD. It's a huge thing that I deal with a lot. I don't really know if this is like a therapist question, but I was just wondering if you had any like tips for like trying to tone down like overthinking and stuff like that outside of like ADHD medication.
Anyone want to start? I can start.
You can start.
All right. So overthinking, it depends on obviously those thoughts, right? But typically being properly stimulated will help with, so that's what the actual medication does. It raises your stimulation level, makes brain not think anymore, and that's one thing. So making sure that you are being, again, it's kind of that mindfulness thing, that thing we suck about doing. That's kind of the thing we need to slowly build the skill on how to do, by regulating what we're doing and regulating our level of stimulation. So, like for example, I always have my headphones in, like probably all the time. Yeah, so regulating how much dopamine you're getting in will help with that.
Yeah, and like I always talk to everybody about like if you're struggling, notice what's going on in your environment on a sensory level in general, because some of us, me, are very sensory seeking. So I love Dragon Con because I love to be absolutely drowned in noises and colors and stimulation and excitement. And so sometimes if I'm wandering around my house and I like walk into a room and I'm like, don't know why I'm here. And then my head is like going a million thoughts, like it's so fast. Sometimes I just have to be like, okay, well, if I put in my headphones and put on this music, then I can actually cook dinner, which I think is why I was in the kitchen, because I just noticed that I was supposed to be hungry and didn't notice that I was hungry because I was too busy being understimulated and thinking too hard. And so sometimes you need more sensory and sometimes you need less. So you might, instead of music, you might need earplugs. You might need to put on your pajamas so you're comfy. You may be overstimulated by scratchy clothes. And so there are so many different things to think about. Sometimes lighting a candle or incense will, activate some like smell, and that can help.
I would say definitely my expertise would be in the area of medication, so that's why I'm deferring to them.
I have a non-medication thing. I heard the evidence from a Stanford researcher, the Andrew Huberman lab. My partner has ADD and has not had good success with medication and keeping a healthy weight. So there were some studies for depression and ADHD that talked about increasing your omega-3s. And so there was a suggestion for a big bottle of omega-3, like cod oil, tastes like close to nothing. We measured out 3 grams because it's much higher than you think. It's like 2 full-size tablespoons. And so she did a small experiment to see what it was like with 2 weeks just having more omega-3s. And she now refers to it as her magic happy juice. Mileage may vary. I have none of the degrees or certifications. Don't listen to anything I say if there is any amount of like wincing.
No, that
faces.
is accurate. I'd also say zinc is good for physical activity. It can sometimes help with mental activity as well.
Thank you.
Hi. So just for context, I was late diagnosed autistic. I work as an entertainer. Yeah, right. I work as an entertainer in my state. What? One of us, right? Can I get a yippee? Anyway. So I work as an entertainer, a professional entertainer in my state, and I have this an internal issue. I get complimented and praised so much in my field to the point where I would think a normal person would get a God complex from it. Like that's how often it happens. And while I do know how I am internally, like what I do for entertainment is very much satisfactory in my mind, it's like blown way out of proportion to like somebody who's watching me. And while I accept everything graciously, recently I've been getting a lot more desensitized to any praise, and I want to still be able to stay human in that sense. Like, because I'm not just this entertainer, I'm also a whole other person outside of, I'm a drag entertainer, if that says anything. I'm also a live singer. So it's like, whenever I do my stuff, it's like, and it sounds so pretentious, but I blow an audience away, and just not to mince words, that's just what I see like in front of me. But to myself, I want to stay human and I want to stay grounded without having to break myself down. And that's just I want to be able to stay humble. And I do think that I am kind of humble. Whenever I talk about this stuff. It's just like stating facts to me. Like that's what I see. But I want to still, I find myself unrelatable to normal people outside of entertainment. So I just wanted to know if there were any tips or anything I can keep in mind whenever I'm interacting with people in my real life, day-to-day life. And because they do praise me as well, but like I said, with the desensitization of the praise, it's harder to find myself relating to everybody.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it's interesting, the concept of like being humble, right? A lot of times I get kind of frustrated. Yeah, please have a seat. A lot of times I get frustrated with like the way that's put on to people, right? Of like you have to be humble, you can't be selfish, you can't be all these things. And so a lot of times it feels like we need to draw ourselves back, we need to dumb ourselves down for the sake of other people. And I always like to remind people that like you can be so good and so amazing all the time, and that doesn't take away from how amazing anyone else is. Like you can be 100% like the coolest person in the world, and so can the person beside you. And I think a lot of times we feel like we have to water ourselves down because we don't want the people who are in our circles to feel like we think we're better than them. And it has nothing to do with thinking we're better than them. It has everything to do with being like, I am freaking awesome, and so are you. Like you can be just as awesome as I am, and I want you to be. And that's like one of my like big things is like I'm cosplay and optimism, and my whole thing is I want everyone to see how awesome they are. I want them to be able to embrace that and feel awesome on stage, off stage, in costume, out of costume, alone, in a crowd.
And I try to do that too, but it's just like when you're working with normal people who do, you know, dumb themselves down around you, it's like, relate with me.
Anyone else?
I mean, I was going to say, because it sounds like to me that the feedback that you're getting about your performance, that it's true. I mean, you can recognize like, I'm awesome. I'm above average. Like, this is really good. You know, I know Mariah Carey says in her house, like, no one can hit these notes like me. I mean, it's just the truth. It's just a fact. And so I don't see anything, you know, if you're totally awesome in what you do, really just accepting that, just to kind of piggyback. It's the true assessment of what's going on. I guess I would say to the people in your life, the like average people, we're all average at something. You know, we all, I'm sure, have things that we excel at and, you know, things that maybe we're not as good at. So I'm a really big believer in living like your truth. So if your truth is about that, is that you are amazing, you're awesome. Again, that speaks nothing to what other people are doing or even what other performers are doing who don't do it the way that you do it. You know, like you say, I don't think it takes away anything from there, but to me, it's not problematic if that is what the truth actually is. And as far as not being able to relate to people in everyday life, I mean, that to me, that's just kind of part of how, you know, just kind of like the world is. There'll always be people that you can't have connection with, and people who perceive like your awesomeness as something against them, right? But you're not responsible for that. You're just responsible for how you exist in the world, not how people perceive, you know, your amazingness.
ADHD tip. If you don't want to interrupt people, you can hold a little pin. That's what I was doing the whole time to make sure I didn't interrupt anybody. But now I pull the pin. So you were describing an issue with social signaling. What that means is basically you communicating non-verbally your internal reality, which is you appreciate the praise, but also like that you're, and this is very common with autism, like when I'm really like burned, I stop making eye contact completely. And what RODBT says is that we don't have to change how we're socially signaling necessarily. We don't have to like mask or anything like that. We can out ourselves. I call that the confession technique. It's like, my tism's a little high right now. I might not be able to properly express gratitude, but that's that's how I feel. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of thoughts. One of them is as aspiring professional creative, and less as someone who actually has professional qualifications, is that when you are giving a creative product to someone, I find that the feedback, when it is positive, can be effusive. And one of the things that is good to remember is that in almost every creative adventure, you can argue to which degree it's true, but the final product is always a collaboration, is my personal belief. So depending on what you are putting out, for me, when I write a story, they are the special effects booth. They're bringing the context of their life to something. I remember reading The Never Hero, and I thought it was okay. And the second book didn't hit me as much. And then I reread it after my dad had passed, and it became one of the most meaningful books I'd ever read. It was a bookmark in that part of my life. I wanted to reach out to the author and ask how they had been so brilliant. And the reality is, part of the reason it was excellent is because I brought the things to the table that was needed for that to become a magical, massive experience to me. And particularly if you are participating in drag, that is a part of someone's identity that is often suppressed by the world around them. And you have to push so hard just to maintain your space. And to finally be in an area, it's like the walls have opened up, you find yourself stumbling forward, and then you're in a place where you are actually like encouraged for the weird thing that's hard around you, which is one of the reasons Dragon Con is so big. So one of the reasons your praise might be effusive is not just because you are excellent at your job, but it can also help you remember that you have collaborated with people to love a part of themselves that has been hard, and they brought a lot to that performance. And so you are being praised as a collaborator with them. It also might be that if you're with people whose jobs aren't as creative, where their experience with praise isn't as effusive and personal, part of it may just be that they have a different job. They may not fit it as well. Their job may not have as much. And I find that we are very invested in creating ways to normalize the circumstances we don't feel like we can change. You will find studies about people's bosses that say that your experience with your direct supervisor has about as much impact on your life satisfaction as that with your direct partner. But you will find people who will find excuses for why their partners are bad just as often as they will talk about why their bosses are bad, and they maintain a relationship and don't challenge it. So some of it may just be like if people are in a job where they don't get praised as much, or they feel like they are tied to a job that isn't as satisfying to yours, they might need to tell themselves that it stinks, and they may not be as comfortable with praise, or they may down talk their work as part of their own personal coping devices. So it can also help to switch your hat. Like, you can recognize this may not, my ability to connect with other people may be an aspect of my job congruity. It may also work to put on your learning hat. People who are lifelong learners often have an easier time overcoming issues of ego, because when you are constantly focused on the thing you want to improve on, and you are constantly searching for sources that can give you the inspiration, even if it's from an adjacent field, it can really help you find ways to relate. I find it easier as a writer because I know everyone's awesome at something. And if I can find the thing they're awesome at, then I can write about it and I can pretend like I'm a good writer rather than me just channeling the thing they're good at. So,
It's complicated.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, there are lots of things. I'm glad you found something you like so much, though. That's awesome.
This is actually a fortuitous follow-up to what y'all have been talking about.
Awesome.
I was recently kind of made aware of my own tendency, and I would assume a lot of people, but I'll just speak for myself. My own tendency to think, okay, achievement is what equals significance, is then what drives value, right? And therefore, I am not valuable if I am not achieving things. And then, of course, you work your whole life that way, and then maybe you do achieve the thing that you worked so hard for, and then you feel like you're significant for a few minutes, and then you feel like you're valuable for a few minutes, but then you find out it's actually pretty empty, right? You get to the top of the mountain and you kind of realize that there's nothing there. And it's actually much more important for us to realize that we are inherently valuable, like you said, like everybody is awesome, right? And then your significance comes from the fact that you are inherently valuable. And then anything you achieve should be coming from that direction, right? But that's not where you drive your personal value. But it's hard to sort of white knuckle it every morning and tell yourself, convince yourself that you are valuable, right? That you are awesome, because the world has told you the whole time that it's actually more based on like what you can come to Dragon Con and tell people that you published a book or you did this thing or this other thing, right? I wonder if, for one thing, if y'all agree, but also if you have strategies for that, right? Because I don't think that it's enough just to try to okay, today I'm going to believe that I have value. If there are actual practical things that you feel like people can do to remind themselves of that deep and very important truth.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
I have something very quick for it. So you're describing a top-down process to try to determine value through thinking and like stuff. I'd be really interested for you in your own stuff, not here, to kind of go more bottom up and be like, okay, feel your way, not think about, feel about what is like limiting your ability to see value outside of it. Because the more, sometimes we'll like Rubik's Cube flip something in our head over and over and over and over and over again, and it'll never equal what we want it to. So sometimes we need to do the opposite and go bottom up.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is that, we are all just our perceptions. We are all just how we see the world, how we see ourselves, what we believe about the world, what we believe about ourselves, right? Like our core beliefs about things, and the things that we've internalized from when we were kids and we were growing up, all the messages that we were told that live within our bodies, that's what we are. Right. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, well, you got to fake it till you make it. You got to say these affirmations. You got to say these mantras and things like that. And, affirmations and mantras are absolutely amazing, but you have to believe them. If you don't believe them, if you don't have buy into them, they do nothing for you. And so I encourage everyone to pick like an affirmation, a mantra, a thing like that actually makes sense to you. It might not be I'm freaking awesome. It might be like I'm not so bad. And then it may eventually grow into an I'm freaking awesome, but you have to start with what you actually believe is true.
Neutral.
Yeah, neutral. Neutral is so important. We won't always be at high highs and low lows, right? Finding our neutral is so important. But then back to the perceptions thing, right? If you feel like your perceptions of yourself are not what you want them to be, they're not providing you with the life you want to live because things feel bad, things feel icky, things feel scary, you feel like you're not productive, so you don't matter, right? Address those perspectives by learning something new. Like I really encourage people to, study mental health things, study, like different types of meditation or thought practices, or just different cultures in general, right? Because we're so steeped in our culture. Sometimes just studying a different culture can help us see, oh, I don't actually agree with this, or I really don't agree with that. So, you know what I mean? Like, let's find the neutral of like what feels good for us. It's like a constant relearning of who we are and how we live in the world, that will make us be able to create a world that we want to live in.
I was just going to say, I can so relate to connecting your identity to achievement. As a person who's going to medical school, you have to literally start planning almost the day that you hit college, and then all these standardized tests, and then the competitiveness, the interviews you get there, right? And then you're right, you get the MD, you get the degree, and it's like training now, right? You go through all these stages and steps, but at the end of the day, when you end up actually being, in my case, previously a practicing physician, it's like it's a job. Dealing with coworkers, dealing with your, retirement. And it, in some ways for me personally, was somewhat of a letdown because when you were in, like the hospitals and things like that, I mean, it almost is like doctors kind of, they're the leaders. They kind of walk on water, and you see these amazing things, like literally people taking their hands and putting them on someone and saving their life, right? And the fact that to me, I've always considered a privilege to have had that experience and be a part of it. But at the same time, I'm a person, I consider myself to be in recovery from being a workaholic and having so much of my identity tied to that. And when I got to a point, I had a health issue, and I literally had, like you were saying, either you're going to slow down or you're going to have to be made to slow down. And when I had to be made to slow down due to a health issue, it really made me question. And what I want to say about the practical tips is I was telling myself a lot of stories about the kind of wife I was, about the kind of sibling I was, the kind of friend I was. And it really wasn't true, really. Yeah. Like where I spent my time, where I spent my money and my energy did not align to the stories that I was telling myself. So what I would say on a very practical level, I think there's nothing wrong with achievement. I think there's nothing wrong with education and degrees, but I would say if you're telling yourself a story about your relationships and the things that you care about, but your time and your energy and things kind of don't align with that. Like for me, I finally had to say, what does it matter if I'm a great doctor if my marriage is this way? If I haven't talked to my mom in a month, I mean, that could be fine, depending on how those relationships are. But for me, it was really being honest with myself and coming to the truth that while achievement was important, because I'm telling myself, oh no, family is important, friends are important, my life is not aligned with that. So I always kind of say that on a very practical level.
Yeah, some of it is also the idea of intrinsics and extrinsic motivation. Are you doing something because it's what you want to do, or because there are rewards? And also bookmarking your efforts on externals is very difficult.
Yes.
Particularly if any of your external benchmarks include the reactions of other people. And I find that can be a big one, because even if you find something inherently fulfilling that makes you awesome. I decided to learn wood carving. I'm still not very good at it. I made little spooky stuff because I like Halloween. And I was so proud because I'd managed to do something without cutting my finger. And I was happy about it for days. But the second you show it to someone who's like, oh, couldn't you have put in overtime and put more in your 401k? It crushed it. So for me, part of it is curating the people you have around you who are encouraging you to dive into the stuff that is intrinsically motivating. And as far as finding what those things are so that you can make the spiral, some of the questions I find useful are, what would you do even if you weren't paid to do it? And what would you do even if you knew it had to fail? And those things tend to guide you towards what will be rewarding and fulfilling. I also had a personal practice where I only ever kept it up for like continuously for 3 or 4 months, but it was very impactful 3 or 4 months. At the end of every day, I would try to sit down and say, what have I done to help the people I have chosen to care about? What have I done that I am proud of? And what have I done that I am happy about? And part of it was because I had misread some research on gratitude and I thought it would suddenly make me a happy person. What I ended up finding was that it was more useful as a pattern tool. So I just figured out that for me, one of the things that made me happiest in life was working hard on a topic I had decided personally that I wanted to do. And that made my work life very difficult. Even before Dragon Con, I had to work a little late so that I could take the day off. And I found myself incredibly happy and proud that I had worked late. When I sat down and examined the feeling, it had nothing to do with my job. It was a dumb task. Everything would have been fine if I didn't do it. Other people were going to fact check that document. But the reason it caused me happiness and pride is because I had been personally working on time management and following up with the commitments. And so I ended up deciding to work towards, not necessarily achieving, the idea of using some of the external benchmarks that people will put on social media as signposts and as MacGuffins to give me an excuse to work hard on something I have chosen to do. So I am a fantasy nerd. I want a sword. I want a sword really bad. Getting a sword won't make me happy. I know that because I already have a sword and it didn't make me happy. I want another one anyway. So now my benchmark is, here are the things I must do to earn it. And my goal isn't to have a sword and to be happy. My goal is to achieve the work, which for me is finishing a book series. Once I have written 3 of them, I get this sword. So my goal is to have fun on the process to getting a sword and occasionally use the sword as a carrot on the stick or the logo for this personal project. And as quickly as possible, accept that the sword didn't make me happy, and then find the next excuse to work hard on something I have personally chosen.
Thank you. All right, yeah, let's keep it going. We got less than 15 minutes, so I want to try to get to the rest of our questions.
Yeah, we're gonna
All right.
lightning round it.
So I have a question about therapy. So I go to group therapy, and that's usually how I ingest my therapy. I try to do one-on-one therapy, but every time I try it with multiple people, I just get way too like in my head and mostly just bored. I don't really like one-on-one therapy, but it's something I need to do after my next step after group therapy. So I'm very worried about like how to transition from group therapy with people that I'm socially aware with and have been with instead into like one-on-one therapy with just someone that like at first I won't know, but even like with people I do like get to like therapists I do get to like how to comfortably transition to that and not be so worried and fixated on it.
My opinion would be to shop around, find a therapist. Like I had a very similar experience as you. I'm not going to say it's the same experience. What helped me was finding a more directive therapist. There are a lot of Rogerian therapists that are like, tell me about how that feels. And you're like, you don't know what to do about it. It's just like,
Bad.
So finding a more directive therapist that kind of has a process that you can work through, for at least me, really helped with that.
Yeah, and it also might be helpful to just look at some different styles of therapy and stuff in general. Maybe someone who does more like somatic stuff. Maybe you want to move your body. Maybe you want to use color pencils. Maybe you want to do things like that. Because there are therapists who do more than just talk therapy too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As having ADHD, do you have any strategies to make school more bearable?
Do you have an IEP?
Yes.
Okay, well, good.
It ties in with intrinsic motivation, but find a thing that you are hyper fixated on and then try to find an excuse that will eventually become genuine to tie what you're learning to that thing. I struggled in grad school. My program focused on a lot of survey development and design and psychometrics, which was not my interest. And so I found the things that I was hyper fixated on, and then I found the bridge. So it's sort of like, if you care about dinosaurs, you can find a way to use math for dinosaurs. And if you don't care about general history, there's usually one part of history you'll care about. I like the history of swords. Could you have guessed? But yeah, sometimes finding the answer in yourself, because other people aren't going to know who you are as well as you are, can be super useful.
Yeah, and so you're able to find those like fun things and incorporate them. You know, it might be like science seems really like scary and daunting, and I don't know what all these things mean, but Spider-Man's a scientist. If he can do it, I can do it, right?
Ooh, also, if you do have ADD, you have an absolute superpower. You just haven't figured out the code to unlock it, because I swear, I have never seen people blow through grad school faster than someone with ADHD or autism who has harnessed their hyper focus. That's the sort of thing that makes everyone around them wonder, like, how can I snort whatever they're sniffing? Because they're doing things that shouldn't
You're
be
allowed
possible.
to do it at the last
That-
minute.
That's how me and my friends talk about. We all that means is that we have more energy than literally everyone else.
It's a
Do you have
superpower.
anything? No? Okay, just making sure.
Hello, quick
Hello.
question. Hi. So I'm a therapist myself,
Nice.
and I love your man. I
Thank
just
you.
love
Thank-
everything
thank
about it. And yeah, I took some things from it. But I want to ask a question just for the therapist, from a therapist. How do you guys hold boundaries for friends who kind of try to force you to be their therapist?
Ooh, I have thoughts.
Go, share your
I'm dealing
thoughts.
with
All right.
this right now.
So I have something that I've adapted from a lesson I took at Modern Path here in Atlanta from Tanya, one of our sexologists. She did, I call it, because she didn't give it like an actual name, I call it additive boundaries. What I mean by that is you focus on what your needs are in the relationship, that then lets you set standards for what for if the need is met. And then if people meet your standards, you give them certain offerings. That like emotional, like deep work is not an offering that you will give most people. You give it to your most important people, or if you give it to like your more outer inner circle, maybe they only get that once a month from you. That kind of thing. It's an offer. You limit the tap.
I see you. It's sort of like a degrees of separation thing.
Yes,
I
sort of
really
like that.
Additive. You call it additive.
I call it additive boundaries.
Just stack it. You get level 2. You get level 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they meet your needs, they get that.
That's amazing.
And you can also, just as you would build your schedule for anything else, you can decide how much friend time you're willing to have. And it might just be like, on Fridays, I can do an hour-long phone call. You know, things like that can be really helpful. And then it's like, now we get to decide which tier of friend you are. Do you get that phone call?
Wow, that is amazing.
Subscribe to my friendship.
And I'm just a big proponent of just really being very honest with people when they do bring something to me that they need to discuss about what my bandwidth is and if I have it. So within my friend group, my close friend group, we have even the thing called the 8-minute phone call. Like maybe it's a check-in, and at the beginning, like this is 8-minute phone call. So we already know whatever we're going to talk about, we're going to be off this phone in 8 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Again, it's just kind of about establishing those boundaries. You know how like some people you don't talk to for a long time because you haven't talked to them in a long time, and you feel like, well, the longer it goes, the longer the conversation is going to be. So that's what we have this group. That's how we implemented the 8-minute check-in. So none of us feel responsible for staying a long. We could have not talked to each other for 1 or 2 months or however long, 6 months. It's going to be an 8-minute phone call. So it's kind of like establishing those boundaries ahead of time and holding space for people because, you know, maybe they've had whatever other thing going on. But also within that same friend group, we are all about like the check-in. Do you have, like, can I vent for a minute? And if the person says, no, actually, I had a hard day at work, or even if they don't give you an excuse, just kind of accepting that and kind of say, okay, so we can either have this as a more superficial phone call, or I can end it if I do need the support to go talk to someone else. But I think kind of normalizing that in your relationship so people don't take offense to it, because I feel like it's the people closest to us that we have the hardest time doing something like that with. So like within my friend group, I brought up the idea. I read it somewhere else, and I was like, hey, what do y'all think about this 8-minute phone call? You know, we're all moms and doing all these other things, and everybody was receptive to it. So I would say kind of normalize those things in your close relationships.
I'm not a therapist, but prior to my this current career, I was a child abuse investigator, and I got enough crisis intervention training that the friends who needed therapy, but for various cultural reasons did not want to admit they needed therapy, would talk to me. And so I had same thing. I picked up the tool of saying, I heard this with one of my therapist friends. People would come up and say, have you got the bandwidth that I can vent to you about this? Or are you full? And I would come to people and I would say it myself so that when they came to me, it felt fair. So like, hey, I don't know how hard your day is, but I saw something really gnarly. Do you have space for me to talk to you about it? And then another one that can depend on your friend group was someone would bring something up and I'd be like, that's real. Do you have a therapy appointment for that? And I would ask them I was like, oh, that's rough, man. Do you want me to help you find someone good for you on BetterHelp? I'm sure we can get you to someone in 2 weeks. Or one of my buddies would walk up and I'm like, do your benefits have another couple sessions this month? That sounds like something you should bring up to your therapist, particularly because I care about your life. And I can tell you right now, I want to give you advice that'll make it easier for me. I want you to break up with your girlfriend right now. So don't ask me how I feel. She keeps ruining our barbecue.
Oh, and
I'm
that's
not going
also
to give you
how
good
keep it-
advice.
You're not their therapist, so you can say, just break up with them. You
Yeah,
don't
I'm
have
not
to be
giving them
that
advice.
empathetic. Oh, tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No
The number
CBT.
the number of times I've told a friend, I'm not giving you therapist advice right now. I'm giving you me advice right now, and I'm like, stop it.
All right. Our last question.
Yes, we got about 4 minutes. Let's get our last question in.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi guys. Hi. I have just a question to ask for tip and advice for when you're worried about things you can control and the things you can't control in your life, and try not to idolize the things that you have no control over. Try not to idolize it so much so you're not attached to it. So like you're urging for it to happen, and if it's not happening, you're not happy with your current life. So I just wanted to need tips and advice of like things you can control. Like I can control my career, I control my car, I control different things in life, but things that I can't control is what I get anxious and upset about. But I don't want to idolize myself to it. So I just want some tips and advice that you all may have.
You said about the things you can control.
Yeah, things that I can and can't control. Like specifically the can't control.
I guess just a couple thoughts I would have about the things you can control for myself is accepting that you're choosing that thing. You know, there's a lot of, a lot of acceptance comes from recognizing that whatever is happening in this situation and whatever my anxiety is, that you're choosing to do that, and whatever those outcomes are. For me, it's very freeing to do that, because otherwise I can feel like I'm going against something all the time. Like it's a fight. Like, why can't it just be this way? Like you're saying, I want this outcome, and why isn't it working? For me, I have a lot of surrender and acceptance by saying, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this path. I'm choosing for whatever these outcomes are going to be, positive or negative. For me, it's very empowering to sit in that. And I have to remind myself, like on days when I had like a hard day at work, I would say, well, I chose this career. And so that means I chose all the things that come about it, even if today was a bad day.
To be very quick, because we're almost out of time, I'll say reading yourself, learning how to read yourself, being mindful to know are you in fight or flight about this? Because if you are, like trying to bring that self down out of that state, and there's lots of tips you can read, will help you like feel like you don't need that control necessarily.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The last one I have is I think zone of influence and zone of control is very useful. So if something isn't in your control, it's in your influence. And so you can just decide how much can I influence it that is worth the amount of time it's going to cost. Sometimes I'll say, like, I know what my hourly rate is to work. Would I pay $40 to spend the next hour stressing about this? And if I wouldn't, I will try to switch tacks. Or Tim Ferriss has a TED Talk. It's like, I can't remember what it is. I have the image in my head. It's like the disaster planning, but he has a little 4-stage thing where he's like, if decatastrophizing pretty much, where it's like, if something does happen, can I set it up so that this thing is out of my control? What's the worst that's going to happen? Which is a classic CBT question. Okay, if this does happen and I do lose my job, what would I do? I would get a new one. I can't control whether or not this awful thing is going to happen to my job, but like, maybe I can check my resume real fast and I'll feel better because the thing that's out of my control really isn't going to do that much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please like the panel in the app and provide any feedback. We deeply, deeply appreciate y'all being here. Y'all have been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your wonderful questions. I've got business cards, I got postcards, and I've also got badge ribbons up here. So if you came to the panel and would like one, please come get one.
Yeah, and we talk with us a little bit. We're not instantly leaving.
Oh yeah, if you see me ever, come say hi. I'm a friend.
And then use of your wings.
I love you so much.